Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I posted videos on the sonic sphere. Life just became a little overwhelming in the past few months, and I promised my husband that I'm not going to work myself to death and I'm going to take breaks whenever I need them. So that ended up causing some delays in the videos on the sonic sphere. But we're back with this video. Before you get any ideas, this is not because of any problems in my house. This is because I'm clumsy and I dropped some things in the kitchen. So now that we got that covered, the next interview is with one of the top professionals that I know of for spatial audio and 3D sound, someone who spent years understanding this technology, talking to different companies, advising to different people about how to approach this very complex topic that is called spatial audio and 3D sound. So I hope you'll enjoy this as much as I did. Let's get started.
Talk about
Really?
everything. Yeah, it's great. And also with the we have a similar AES, like this Audio Engineering
Hmm.
Society German section thing. There's also like days on spatial audio, but most of the time they just talk about music. And this is also what triggers me. There's like so much more you could do and nobody's talking about it. And this is what you're gonna do today, I guess.
Yeah, in America, it's actually the opposite. Everyone is only talking about the technical parts, and usually I hear
What?
really ugly demos, and it's usually with huge speaker arrays. And what I found with spatial audio is that many times the only thing I find is people in their grad school or in their doctorate, like just building their own algorithm for spatial audio, and then just one company buys it, and then that's it. And then another generation of students come and they build the same thing, and then companies build it, and that's it. But
That's
no one is actually
interesting.
using it for anything creative. They just like the technical parts of it.
I would have thought it's the other way around. The Germans are more into the
Really?
engineering, but apparently here there's a lot of talk about like this musical aesthetics and stuff like that. So,
Hmm. Yeah, no, here
hmm.
everything is technical. It's like you just need to enable it. It doesn't even matter what you do with it. You just need to say you have it, and like the algorithms is so much more interesting than the sound itself. Hello, everyone. We're here today to talk about spatial audio and immersive sound. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. Martin, I met him years ago, and I think that there was a startup that tried to bring a lot of spatial audio, and they just came to both of us. And I'm like, oh, there is another person in the industry that is fascinated as much as I am to spatial audio. I thought that I was alone in this. And after this, I found a lot of other people that are really passionate about spatial audio, but no one who is that familiar with this like Martin. So I'm so happy that you joined us today. How are you doing?
Really, thank you so much for the invitation. It's so great that you try to bring the community together and talk about everything on spatial audio because I always feel like there are just tiny discussions on tiny topics and we try to give it all to you. I'm doing great. And as you can tell, I'm yeah, very looking forward to the discussion. So
That's
cheers from
amazing.
Germany, I guess.
That is so great to have. I'm here in Boston, so like big time difference, but I'm glad that
Nice.
we could make it. Let's start with a very, I feel like it should be a simple question, but for some reason it's not. What is spatial audio?
No, that's really hard to
What
tell.
is that? Because, like,
Um,
everywhere I go, every conference, I would ask people what is spatial audio, and even the top people from Meta and from Dolby, no one can agree on a definition.
Yeah, everybody has a different answer, and I can just tell you my definition on it. Let me give you, I just told you, but for the audience, it's just a fun story. If you go to the Apple homepage and read on their spatial audio products and software and whatnot, and you switch the page to Germany, spatial audio suddenly becomes 3D audio, which is so weird because apparently we don't even have a term in Germany for spatial. That's why I call it 3D audio because I feel like it's gives you it tells you, okay, sound is somehow three-dimensional. You don't have just left and right with stereo, you also have it behind you or even above you and below you. And for me, this is 3D audio. But you could also make it more complicated and say, oh, maybe I would also want to move to the sound or move back or most spatial audio technologies think of you like always being in the sweet spot, or do you even have head tracking, do you have loudspeakers, do you have headphones, and you suddenly understand, okay, it depending on the use case, spatial audio has a different meaning, and most of the time also a different technology behind it. So this would be my answer. It depends on the scenario, I guess, so this is really hard to tell.
So when Dolby is telling you that they have spatial audio versus Meta versus, let's say, Apple tells you they have spatial audio, what do they mean by that? What are they selling us?
That's a good question. This is why I came up with this concept that I call 3D audio metrics, which is like this shiny object, which it is. But I I talk you through it really quick. It basically uses the term of degrees of freedom. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with that. Otherwise, I try to explain it. You
Maybe
probably
try
can
to
do it
explain
better
that.
than I do it. But let's start with 3 degrees of freedom. Basically means that you're sitting somewhere and you can move your head in rotations, three axes, I guess. So you have up, down, left, right, and you could also tilt your head. This is where you are in the world of head tracking. And this is where you have 360 videos, for example. I guess you are most of the time familiar with that, where you move your head around. But if we step one step back, you could say that there is media that has 0 degrees of freedom, which sounds weird, but think of films. You watch a film and you watch to the front. You're not supposed to look to the left, to the right. You're supposed to watch to the front. So for me, this
Right.
has 0 degrees of freedom. But still, the sound can be spatial. You can have sound behind you with a film, like, I don't know, like a helicopter flying above you. This could still be spatial audio. So you would have 0 degrees of freedom with, I don't know, podcasts, films, music productions, for example. Then you would have 3 degrees of freedom, which is medium that where you are supposed to move your head, just like with 360 videos, or maybe with headphones that do have head tracking. And then like this peak, I would say, is 6 degrees of freedom, which means you don't just have rotation, you also have translation, I guess is the fancy term for walking to sound. And this is what you have in game engines, for example. And you know it from normal 3D games, like every ego shooter ever, like a first person shooter, has 6 degrees of freedom sound. You're basically walking in a 3D space. And if you walk closer to something, it gets louder. If you walk away, it gets quieter. If it's behind a wall, you even have occlusion and stuff like this. So this is why I came up with this 3D audio metrics, which basically just uses those terms, but it separates really good those use cases. And now I can answer your question. When Dolby sells you spatial audio, they sell you 0 degrees of freedom, which means you watch a film or you listen to music, but you are not even supposed to look around. And this
I
try to
would say that
okay,
if we try to define degrees of freedom, this is the freedom to move your head or be the camera in the scene,
yeah,
right? Because like when you watch a film, something that a lot of creators do is they would put the camera in specific angles to kind of tell you a story. Where when you
mm,
add degrees of freedom, then like you are telling the story, you choose where to look and what to interact with. It's a less guided experience, right? Um,
exactly. You have more possibilities to, yeah, to create your own experience, I would say. Like it gets more interactive. Like a movie, you press play and then it's that. While
yeah.
in 360 videos, you press play, can move your head wherever you want, but still then you have an end. But with 6 degrees of freedom, most of the time you can stay as long as you want to. You have interactivity and you're independent in time and space, I guess.
I guess that creates a challenge for creators of how do you still convey a story when you don't have control over what the user is going to be even looking at, forget interacting with, but you have no control what's going to happen.
Exactly. With 360 videos, I talk so much about it because I feel like 360 videos are not dead. They are, I mean, there was a hype in, I don't know, 2016. This is where I was also benefiting
True.
a lot and did a lot of productions. But still, I do them every now and then. And the people who who got stuck with it, like who really learned how to tell stories with this medium, they came up with incredible stuff. I mean, watch something from Felix and Paul. They're so high quality, it's like insane, and the sound is just on point. And they understood how to use the medium, and then you don't have to worry as much as, oh, people are missing all the action. And this is where sound can add so much value. You literally hear somebody coming from the door before the people enter the room, and then you can already move around, and then there's a person coming. While with films, it doesn't really matter. Like you just put a sound on of a door, and then that's that. But for 360 videos, you have the possibility to guide the viewers where they are supposed to looking at. So basically, you could say the ears tell the eyes where you are looking at.
So, can you give us some advice or tips on how to create effective 360 videos, or
Yeah.
insights that you learned along like working on a lot of those films?
Yeah, I think easy does it most of the time. People try to be so complicated. Now you have so many possibilities, you want to use them, but really try to just make it simple and see what even one object does to the scene. Maybe you have two objects, but I see such an overload of sounds from everywhere, and you have a hard time even perceiving, like, to localize where everything is coming from. So maybe focus on one important object of the scene that people are supposed to listen to, and this should be the object with the highest localization, while the rest of the sound should be put a little bit into the background. It could be diffused, or it could even be mono, to be honest. If people see a car, for example, it's not as important if the car sound is spatial or not, but it shouldn't distract them. Like, imagine a musician standing at the street and you have cars on the left, on the right, moving all the time. Like, this could be annoying. So you could make those cars mono, for example, and but the sound from the music spatial, so it triggers attention. So long story short, my tip would be try to make it simple, and also think about the priorities of sound. I feel most of the time with classical films, the most important thing is music. Maybe even voiceovers are more important than music. And then, if you want, you can add sound effects. But it's like a nice to have, I feel like. But with 360 videos, I would say the priority from music to sound effect changes, because if you have a scene and it already has good sound, this is more than enough. I feel like you would overload the viewers with adding music and then adding your voiceovers. Well, having a nice scene with nice spatial audio would already help the people to guide them to through the scene and not overload them. Because imagine VR is already such a visual medium, like it's so hard. It takes a lot of capacity for a brain, I guess, and then adding three layers of sound, voices, music, and sound effects, it gets just overloading. And this is the common mistake I heard, that there was just too much going on sound-wise, and sometimes just simple sounds would have done it.
I'll ask a difficult question, but something
Oh,
that I noticed a lot in VR. We have nowadays the best screens ever with the OLED presentation and like even 4K resolution on those headsets. Now, we have really good companies for earphones. We have noise cancellation. But for some reason, all of the headset manufacturers are choosing the cheap little like headphones that are bleeding so much and you can hear the reality. But what I noticed that people kind of like that. Why don't we want to be immersed in spatial audio? Like, why not put the best Bose headphones ever and have a great experience?
I have a nasty answer for that.
Give us the
What's the
nasty answer.
point? Honestly, most of the time, VR experiences sound bad. So what's the point of listening to bad sounding experience with good headphones? Honestly, that's the hard truth. I don't want to like blame all of the VR creators, but you can have a listen. And as I just mentioned, like most of the time they're just using stereo, if even, or just background music, and then that's the experience. And I
Mm.
hardly know experiences where it would be worth wearing headphones to really have this great effect. One good example would be Assassin's Creed, this VR title they had, and they even had in the menu so many options to choose from to make your spatial audio experience better, and then you could change the rendering from headphones to headset or something like that, which means if you were wearing no headphones, it would be optimized for the built-in headphones. So you would have two possibilities to listen with headphones or without headphones, which means when you're wearing headphones, it has more dynamic range, which means like the louder objects are more louder and the quieter quieter. But it would be hard to perceive those differences on tiny headphones that are built into a VR headset. So I guess this is what this option does for you. But this is one of the few titles I know that really dug into this. Oh, now let's make great sound for VR. While most of the time people are like, people are not even wearing headphones, and this is why the titles sound like that, I guess.
Why do you think that is? Because like we do have immersive experiences for audio. Like we have the Barber Shop that is like a very known recording for like 3D sound that was done, I think in the 70s or something, for binaural experience. But why aren't we investing more in sound?
I think is that the problem is people just don't know better. Most of the time they create something and the idea is not like a sound guy coming up with a VR experience. It's most of the time some storyteller, some developer coming up with a VR experience, then they're doing the project. And when they're close to be finished, they realize, oh, we need a sound guy, but we don't even have budget anymore. And that's most of the time the reality why they think about sound when it's too late or don't even have the budget to make it right. And it's more unfortunately a business problem. And I was really mad about people not booking me or like colleagues doing their sound because it was so obvious that sound would put value to the experience. But then I realized, how should they know what good sound is when they have not experienced it before? And I guess this is the problem, like this blind spot that they have.
So you're saying it's on us as musicians and creators to bring that out.
Exactly. This is why I'm talking so much about spatial audio that people know about it. Because if I'm not talking about spatial audio in Germany, at least, hardly anybody is. And sometimes you really have to be nasty. You really have to point fingers and say, hey, this VR experience sucks because whatever, right? Sometimes you have to be this guy, but I guess long term we can all benefit from it. To put I don't know if that's the term, the finger into the wound or something like that. To yeah, to be annoying and make them aware of sound. Obviously, in a good way. Don't be the annoying sound guy. And I feel like most sound people get wrong is they try to argue with the technology. Like, oh, you need to have this spatializer and this HRTF and those technical terms. But this is what doesn't really persuade people. You have to try to find some emotional value because this is what influences the decision much better than just having data or facts or something. Because most of the time, people, I think, they decide by facts, but later on, they have like an emotional connection, something like that. I'm lacking words here, but you get the point that
So you're
you get
right.
it.
There are like so many different terms. And yes, I would like to go over the terms, but let's say someone is just starting and they're a musician and they really want to put their sound in an experience, like a VR or AR experience, and they don't know all of those fancy terms like ambisonics and binaural, HRTF. Where where do you start? Like, how do you develop an approach for what should be spatial audio, what's not?
Yeah. This is what I try to say, like, don't talk don't try to use the technology because you can. Try to think of something where you think, "Oh, this technology could help me," like, find a benefit or create something that hasn't been done before, or if this is where I have value. And if you say you are a musician and feel like, "Oh, my mixes, they always I don't know, they sound too I don't know, not spatial. They are too mono or something. I want to try something that I can really hear those instruments like every instrument should pop out, and I really want to have like this full experience or whatnot. This is where you could try to yeah, use free I don't know, spatial audio tools. My favorite is still ambisonics. There are so many free tools out there where you can literally place sounds all around you. It's free. You can use Reaper, which is also sort of a free digital audio workstation. And this is where you break the borders of having stereo, which is just panning sounds left and right. You now have left, right, back, front, above you, below you, and
So
just
let's
mess
talk for
around.
a second about
Yeah.
the terms. So mono, stereo, multi-channel, and ambisonics. Can you just clear
Yeah,
those terms
that's
for us?
I try. Okay, maybe let's start with 3D and then go backwards because
Okay.
otherwise it would be confusing. Yes, and
Okay.
imagine sitting inside of a room, could be your living room, for example, and you have like this audio object that you can place anywhere. You can place it in front of you, you can place it to the corner, to the left, to the right, to the back, even above you or even below you. This is where you this is what I would call 3D audio, and this is what you could do with technologies like ambisonics. But you could also do something like this with Dolby Atmos, for example. You couldn't really place sounds below you. But this is another story. Let's not get into that. Let's talk about what is 2D audio then. And you probably know it as surround sound. This is where you have sounds coming from the front and the back. You don't have something above you, you don't have something below you, and this is what 5.1 tried to do for a decade now, but didn't really become a thing because you would have to have 6 loudspeakers, like one on the left, one on the right, one center, one on the left back, right surround, and then a subwoofer. So a lot of cables, a lot of loudspeakers, a lot of hardware, and you would need content that even was mixed in 5.1 sound. So it also didn't really get a thing. If we go one step back, you would have one-dimensional sound. I know it's not really a term, but think of it. I remember my math classes where you would have this coordinate system, right? And you do have like a three-dimensional coordinate system where you can place
Finally, you
your
realize that like what is 2 dimensions? What is 1 dimension?
Yeah, exactly. And think of it literally like a, I don't know, 3D audio is basically a cube, 2D audio is just a plane, and one-dimensional sound is basically just a line, right? And this is what stereo could be considered. You just have a line to place your sound from the left to the right. You can't move it to you or back or something. It's basically just one-dimensional sound. And if you go more steps back, you would have 0D, which I would consider mono. You just have one sound
Correct.
that
Yeah.
doesn't really have any spatial information. It's just there, basically. And this would be my take on what is 3D audio and where are we even. But I hope this doesn't confuse people more than it explains something.
I think the confusion is because at the end of the day, yes, we have like different amount of speakers, but at the end of the day, you can achieve all of those dimensions using just 2 headphones. It sits on your ears. So how come you have so much when you have just 2 speakers?
That's
Um,
a good point. Yeah, most of the time people just think of, like I just did with loudspeakers in mind. You have speakers in your room, and then you have 5 speakers and 6 or 2 or whatnot. But then you have this other approach of just having headphones. And oh god, where should we start to explain? I guess the people think you would need a special pair of headphones to perceive spatial audio, but this is not the case. You
yeah, they used
need
to
a
sell us HRTF headphones.
exactly. And what even is HRTF? That's another topic. But for spatial audio, you need a special microphone or special software. For headphones, for example. And you already talked about like this virtual barbershop. They literally built a microphone which looks like a human head, and in the ears they put microphones. So if you're wearing headphones, it just sounds like a human head, like how we perceive sound. And this is what then is called binaural audio, binaural recording, and it already works great. But you can't really change anything afterwards. Like, you can't really mix sound into this because you have this one shot and then that's your experience and you can't tweak it. Like, there's nothing you can do.
It's
But
kind of
if you
like a
want,
screenshot of reality in
yeah,
terms
it's
of
like taking a
sound.
picture or something.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like,
Yeah.
imagine analog films. You took a picture, there was no way to manipulate an analog picture. Like, how would you
Right.
do that?
Right.
But now with digital photography, I guess you have the option to use something like Photoshop, which would be those spatial audio plugins
Which
to
sometimes
mix.
still we find, like, and we see that something was photoshopped in, like, we still have this sense in us.
Exactly. And this is what now everybody's using, basically using Photoshop for spatial audio, I guess.
That's
And
interesting.
try to have those, like, I don't know, a guitar sound and put it into a virtual space and move it around you, just like I said, with three-dimensional parameters, left, right, up, back, and so on. And then add a little bit of reverb so that the sound would know where is it even playing? Otherwise, you would just have an empty space, which sounds unnatural. This is why we add reverb and whatnot, so that it would really sound like it's playing in your living room, for example. This is what everybody's using now, basically Photoshop for spatial audio, trying to mix sounds into a space, hoping that it fits together, but it's not as easy. Sometimes it just sounds like, I don't know, you took your scissor and cut out paper and then glued it on another paper, and then that's the experience. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't not, because the technology is not really there yet to be the magic, I guess.
So I would ask you, what is your recommendation? What is your go-to tools for ambisonics? You mentioned that there are certain microphones. Which one is your favorite? What would you recommend to other people?
Yeah. I know like a handful of people 8 years ago who bought a Sennheiser Ambeo and a Zoom F8 because they thought now this 360 VR thing is happening, but it never happened. So I can't really recommend buying microphones and recorders for 2,500 euros, which is just using, yeah, using 4 channels. Now there's the Zoom H3 VR, which is
Mhm.
fairly compatible price. But it's just like with the 360 camera, you can't really place it somewhere, press record, and imagine it to be the best spatial audio experience. In reality, you would have to combine it with other microphones. Imagine you have a guitar player playing outside. I don't know. You can use the ambisonics microphone, press record, but you should also record the guitar separately, just as a mono file, so you would have more possibilities to tweak the sound later. And this approach works for, I don't know, I would say basically all immersive media that you try to capture everything around you, which could be ambisonics, it could be other fancy microphones like dummy heads, it could be ORTF 3D with 8 microphones, whatnot. Let's just call it spatial microphone, which captures a little bit of everything, which is combined then with isolated mono sources, which is basically, I think, spot mics is the term, that you pick up every
That's a good advice.
object
Yeah.
as good as possible. So you would have the possibility to, yeah, mix it together in the end, that you say sometimes the spatial audio mic already works great. There's nothing I have to tweak. But sometimes you would realize, oh, it sounds too spatial. Like everything sounds so far away. But if you mix in those isolated sound sources, this is what gives you more this larger than life sound, I guess. Especially when people are talking, you want to understand what they're saying, like speech intelligibility, or what's the term? You know it. Say it for me. And you also want to have this. And yeah, the key is to find the right balance between those worlds. And also with those isolated sound sources, you still have the possibility to mix it into ambisonics. And now I can answer your question on what tools I can recommend. Just honestly, just Google on free ambisonic tools. You would find the IEM suite, I guess, which is free VST plugins. Then there's also Alto University that comes to my head. And then is from Dear Reality is basically, I think it's called MB Micro or
Hmm.
just Micro. They have two plugins. One is for ambisonics encoding and decoding, and the other one is just a panner where you can just pan, and it's super simple. Like it gets so complicated quickly, so don't try to get overwhelmed with the tools. Maybe just start with this DVR Micro or something, and then
So
just
those
pan
are all
around.
for a traditional DAW, correct? Like for a digital
Yes.
audio workstation. Those are usually like you hear them with headphones, like with regular traditional headphones. So how do you even test for things like this if you're not in a VR experience? Like, I mean, of course, if you put it in a headset and it's in a video game, then you can hear the changes in sound, but how would you hear it in a DAW?
It's okay. Um, let's try to find okay, a simple scenario. Let's talk about this, I don't know, DVR panning tool. Imagine
Hmm.
it works a little bit like stereo, where you have left, right, but instead of this line, you have a circle. So you can place sound around you, and you could also place it above you or below you. And you put in one channel of sound or two channels of sound, could be mono or stereo, but it basically mixes it together to mono, I think, and then places it around you again. So you would really hear when it's from the right, it really everything is coming from the right. But it outputs two channels of sound because we have two ears. And this is
Right?
how spatial listening works, that even if you place the sound on the right, you would still hear something on the left, which could be reflections from the room or yeah, sound traveling through your head or something.
Right.
We can talk a little bit more about like how the spatial listening even works, maybe
I think that
afterwards.
would be interesting. Yeah, we'll get to
But
that
the
in a
what
sec.
what the tool does is basically this magic, like rendering in real time, how this one sound in this virtual space would sound for a human head. And then it renders all the time, okay, now it's on the right, and now on the right ear it's louder on the left ear, and this happens in real time. And this is what happened in the last years, that the calculation got so good and so quick that it's possible now to do this in real time. But since you were asking on how does this work now also for loudspeakers and how do I even preview that? It really depends. Like you would need a tool that does not output you two channels. You would need a tool that outputs you more channels when you have more loudspeakers. Imagine you have a 5.1 system. You would
Right,
need a plugin that outputs you 5.1 channels, or in
right,
the case of ambisonics, it outputs you ambisonics that can then be transformed or decoded to whatever channel based loudspeaker setup you have. Or you could even rotate the sound field if you have head tracking headphones.
right. Do you have any advice on sounds that would spatialize better than others, like the sound itself, not just the technology?
Yes, and the good example is 8D audio. I'm not sure if you know that. Did you
HD audio?
8? Like just the four
Ah, 8D audio? What is 8D audio?
it's
I've
so
seen even
weird.
100D audio, but I'm like, I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing. So yeah, let's talk about multidimensional audio.
Yeah, it's oh god. It's a real thing on YouTube. Like I'm not gonna lie, it has billions of views. It's insane.
Maybe
Like
that. What
the
is that?
audio okay, basically somebody uses this spatializer tool I was just talking about and made it input music and then makes it circle around the head all the time. That's 8D audio. Why is it called 8D audio? Nobody really knows.
I think it's a
It's
hype.
also
I think
it's a
it's a
hype.
hype.
Exactly. Just like a little bit like ASMR or like those weird internet hypes. But it works. And why it works has many reasons. Because since the sound is moving, our head always has the possibility to perceive it spatially. Imagine just a sound coming from the right. Yeah, it could be mono, it could be spatial. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But since the sound is always moving and you always have this reflection in this virtual room, it works incredibly well because it's music. And
So
since you
when you say
asked,
it works, you mean it like it gives the effect, basically.
It gives the effect on headphones that sound is moving in your living room, and you try to move you to remove your headphones, and then you are like, "Where's the sound coming from?" This is
Mm,
this spatial audio where you forget you're wearing
works on our
headphones
brain.
since the
Yeah.
sound is coming from around you, and it works remarkably well. This is why it's such a huge thing called 8D audio, 9D audio, 12. Like, I have more D than you, I guess. That's the marketing thing always. But just look it up and you will be amazed how people love it. You, as an audio engineer, we would think like that's stupid putting sound in a spatializer and make it circle around your head all the time. Like, why would you want that? But who are we to judge people who like this experience? And for me, it tells people love spatial audio, but they don't really know yet what to listen to. And since you asked what works good with spatial audio, just put music into a spatializer and make it move around your head, and you will realize, oh, this is what it does. But if you, I don't know, use abstract sounds like sine waves or synthesizer sounds or something, this is unnatural for our brains. So it's a bit difficult to have this perception of spatial audio. But yeah, maybe start with something that has all the frequency range. Like, music always has something from the bass to the mids to the highs, while some sounds just have highs, some sounds just have bass, for example. And yeah, this works pretty good, and people love it. So I don't know.
So I'll challenge you with another one. Apple, a few years back, they added spatial audio to all of their devices, and
Hmm.
using their new earphones, you can have spatial audio, and they also released spatial music, which is like on their app, you can listen to everything in a spatial way. Now, they put it on by default, and they did some studies on it, and it looks like about 50% of their users are using the spatial music. And that means that 50% of them were so annoyed by it that they had to go to the setting, find where it is, and turn it off. That's how annoying it got to people. So, like, I tried in the past to record some 360 audio or like music that is played spatially, and I noticed that people don't really like that, especially when it's their own music, when they come to record in the studio and you're like, "Ooh, I can move the bass and the guitar so they're seated in the room." The musicians usually don't like that because they're so used to like the sound being like right here in their face. Um, what would
Yeah.
be your advice on it?
Maybe let me just this 50% result that you saw. I also saw that, and it doesn't even say how long people were listening to spatial audio.
That's
It
true.
just said that people listened to 50% of the people are listening to, I don't know, Apple Music with spatial audio.
That's
But
true.
as you say, most of them, or like 50%, were annoyed, and the other, like the rest, probably are also annoyed because of it. And you
They
don't
just
know how
couldn't find the
long.
setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is it so annoying?
It's I would love to have so much more like details on how people really liked it. But what you say is, I'm not sure if they are really annoyed, but I would say they just prefer, as of right now, stereo because they are used to listening sound in stereo. And when we wear headphones, we have two channels and it goes directly onto our ears. And now, what spatial audio tries to do to get away from the ears, you remember that you forget that you are even wearing headphones, that you would have this experience just like in real life. Imagine you don't wear any headphones, that you have a musician in front of you or behind you, or there's a band playing. They want to give you this experience. But as you can tell, when you are used to wearing headphones and having sound directly onto your ears compared to a spatial experience that you are not really used to, why would you want to have this? And the key right now is to find use cases where the spatial audio does make sense. And I would say there are genres that work good, like better in spatial audio than in stereo, but there are also genres just like metal music that has to be right into your face, that has to scream at you, it has to hurt. But making it spatial means suddenly the guitars are just sounding white far away from you, I guess. And this is what for me doesn't really work. And you have like some really annoying filtering going on. It just sounds off. So I really understand why people would not like this. But imagine classical music, where classical
I was
music
just
is,
thinking about that, to be honest.
yeah, it's always even made for a room. Like most of the time, they're
Saber
using,
music, literally called
yeah.
chamber music.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, the whole composition it takes the room into the account. And this is where it can make it can sound better than stereo. But honestly, what even is better? It is more a matter of taste, I guess, and also what your experience is and how open you are to it, yeah, having this new feeling. But I feel like we're now in a transition phase where we have more and more touch points with spatial audio. There are touch points that you don't like, just like you say, 50% didn't like it. But then you have 8D audio, or games even, or VR, where people like, oh, this 3D audio is interesting, I understood what it does. And I feel like with having those touch points all around in different settings, people will more and more be open to even having this with music. But music is a difficult use case for spatial audio, I would say.
That is so true. Now that you were saying this, I was thinking I had an experience in MIT, I think, about a year ago that they tried to play synthesizer music. They just someone brought a modular synthesizer and they played all those clicks and like weird sounds. But the problem is that their hallway was not acoustically treated at all. So each sound they played bounced through all of the like all of the walls and were so annoying. But a week later, it was like getting closer to Christmas, and there was a group that was singing a carol in the same hall, and suddenly all the voices resonated, and it wasn't annoying. Suddenly everything was so whole and full, and I'm like, how is that I like both of those styles of music. One of them sounded awful, and the other one sounded so magical. I feel like in the past, maybe people had the ability to think about the space more. You see cathedrals and sound that is played in space. So I'm guessing that now with spatial audio, we're going back to this.
Yes, for me, the answer is always try to find a use case where this, like, the storytelling makes you think of the space. Like literally, it's in the name, spatial audio. I mean, okay, spatial. You could argue like, where's the word coming from, or you could write it
Yeah.
with a C. I just mentioned the spatial audio.
Full
Um,
audio.
yeah, whatever. But yeah, for me, I would say live concerts would be the way to go for spatial audio, because you have the sound coming from the front, you have maybe the audience from the back or around you. And this is where the experience of being inside, it transforms very well to the experience. But having, as you say, some synthesizer sounds and adding reverb, like what's the point? It just sounds abstract. For me, this live feeling should also be transported into like the room, and then it makes more sense for our brain why even sound is spatial. Otherwise, it would just be confusing. So maybe try to start with maybe a guitar performance in the street, for example. I still feel like this could work way better than having a studio recording and then try to make it spatial, or maybe try to write a song that somehow uses the space. I have no idea how it this sound like, or what would you do, but I think you get the point to, yeah, work with the spaces, as to say. Very good, yeah.
Martin, you've been in the industry for a while. What are the most interesting experience that you can point out to people to just go and try? Or things that you've seen, something that someone made that was like exceptional?
Okay, I think I'm back again. Can you
Yes, you're back
confirm?
again. My
Okay,
question
perfect. I
was,
understood your
yeah,
question.
okay, okay.
Like, okay, perfect. My go-to favorite spatial audio experience still is this virtual barbershop. Although it's like so old, I still recommend it because you can just tell people wear headphones and there you go. And people are so surprised how good it is. And what they did correct was using the technology creatively. And I think like we have to find the sweet spot where we don't really talk too much about the technology and why we are using this. We just use it to tell stories or like giving people new experiences. And this works remarkably well. And this would be my favorite example for, I don't know, radio drama, however you want to call it. For music, I think I can recommend the Dolby Atmos mix from Rocketman. Oh, this is embarrassing. It's a famous artist, Elton John.
Elton John, yes.
And there we
We'll
go.
put a
Thank you.
link in the descriptions, yeah.
And it's a decent mix because you like Rocketman, he flies to the sky, and this is where also
Oh,
the
I
music
didn't even think
somehow
about that.
flies. Yeah, this makes so much sense, right? This
Because it tells a story of like, okay, yeah, I get that.
That's a very decent mix. For films, obviously, all films that have some action in it. I mean, you go to the cinema, you pay the extra bucks to have this immersive experience, to have the feeling of sitting inside the films. Regarding 360 videos, I think I can recommend. Let me think. What the sound? I do have a blog article on my blog, obviously, that where I recommend 360 videos. Um,
We'll post a link as well
yeah, maybe let's
after
just
the
do
talk.
that. But there's this beatbox experience, and they used spatial audio also insanely good. Like there was this beatboxer, and then sometimes he's like in this parking lot, and you have so much reverb. Then suddenly he's outside, and then he's so close to you. Then he's just bouncing around you and stuff like that. It's insanely good work, and it's also 7 years old. And regarding VR, I still recommend Notes on Blindness. I'm not sure if you know that.
Notes on
It's
blindness?
base Yes. Oh,
I
I think it's for
haven't tried that
free.
one.
Oh, you should. It's just doing so many things right. Basically, it's the story of you becoming blind, which means you
I think I've heard
suddenly
about
see
this.
less and suddenly you hear more. And it's visually very good. Like you have this fancy lightning particle effects, which tell you there's something happening, and you suddenly listen to the sound. Like there's nobody telling you, you should listen to spatial audio. The story makes you listen to the sound. And I think we have to find the sweet spot, not being too obvious, but still being obvious with the effect of it, right?
I agree. I agree. It's so hard because when you do a good job, no one even noticed that you did anything. That's what I feel like. Like I'll work on a
Yeah.
spatial audio app and then I'll tell people, "Oh, notice this. Notice that when you move away." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, okay." So I feel like you're right that's going to be the biggest challenge to create an impact without telling people that you're even trying to create an impact.
Yeah, maybe another VR experience that everybody loves is Beat Saber, right? It's yeah, you have
Yeah.
lightsabers in your hand, you have boxes flying at you, you smash them. It's just so much fun.
The
Everybody
music
loves
is
it.
2D, no?
Exactly. That's my point. Why would it be spatial?
It's a good question because you're in space. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Are the
also thought
lightsabers spatial? I think so.
I think so. I think the sound when you smash them and move your head, you would hear that something is happening around you. But this is one of the use cases where I think it's perfectly fine in stereo. Like, obviously, it could add more space if you use the right sound. Maybe it could be interesting. But honestly, this thing is also sort of 0 degrees of freedom. You're always supposed to watch to the front. So what's
Right,
the point of moving around? And this is
right.
it's a sound experience, like a music experience for VR, but not spatial audio. And I think this is okay.
Well, we're approaching the end of the talk. Martin, there's one more question. What do you see the future of spatial audio? Where are we going to be in 5, 10 years from
Ooh.
now? How are people going to experience sound? What kind of devices are we going to be using?
Yeah, everybody says spatial audio is going to replace stereo, but I would disagree. I think there is a coexistence. There are multiple reasons,
I
like
agree
as a
with that.
content creator, that there's things that shouldn't be spatial, as we just discussed, and vice versa. There are things
Right.
that don't make sense in stereo. So it would be great to have audio formats that support both of it, and they are upcoming. I saw like this Apple, no, damn it, what's it called? This Apple Vision Kit, uh,
The
Vision
Vision
OS?
Pro
Yeah.
kit? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It already has this fundamental of having audio objects that you can place in space, just however you want in 3D space, which would be 6 degrees of freedom. Then you have channel-based objects, which you could use for sound, for reverbs, or for everything that's diffused that you're not supposed to localize, just like the cars I mentioned passing by. You could throw them into the channel-based thing, being 3 degrees of freedom, so it would be spatial, but not too much. And then you would have this headlocked stereo, which is basically sound that's playing independent from where you're looking at. And I think this combination with it, you can do everything. But this is also what Dolby got wrong. For example, you don't have headlocked stereo, you don't really have head tracking. So I would disagree that this
Right.
format is future proof. And I see that this trend will be in the upcoming formats, that you have to have those three worlds basically. And with this, you can
That's
basically put
interesting.
sound on everything.
So it's kind of like the next generation of 5.1 or 7.1. So even in those systems, like you'll have a lot of speakers, but you'll have one, like why is it five and not four? Because the fifth one is dedicated to dialogue and that sits like on the screen in the middle. So they're already kind of doing this dynamic mixing, but maybe the next generation would be like not even thinking about speakers, but thinking about just directionality and where sound should be coming from.
Exactly. And another guess would be that sound becomes more personalized. I feel there is a demand on
Yes.
Apple Music.
Yes.
You already can filter out the voice to have like your own karaoke version, which they did with AI or something, which is not the
Oh, they
point
already
of
have
having
that? I
it.
need to try.
Yeah, I was surprised. It's insane. Like, it's already there. I thought you would need object-based audio, but apparently an AI can just render out the vocals, and then you have the slider, and you can just adopt however you want to have it. And imagine watching your, I don't know, favorite sport, and you have a commentator, and you don't want to have the commentator. You just want to have the spatial ambience of the stadium, for example. And you could just remove this object, which is the whole point of this object-based audio, and we're not going
The
into that right now,
dynamic
like, that's
mixing.
another.
Yeah.
Exactly, that you can tweak the sound however you want to. But because, as you just said, 50% of the people liked spatial audio, the other half did not. But what if you had the possibility to not just switch it on and off, but I don't know, have something in between and learn a little bit more about what it does and how you would like it?
What does it mean for us as creators? We need to let go of our need of
Yeah.
control to like control the entire mix and the experience that we give to other people?
Yeah, Dolby hates this trick. They're like, "Oh, we want to give you the perfect experience, and you're not supposed to change anything. That's why we have
Well,
those
because they're putting a lot of
rendering."
thought into the experience. That's
Yeah,
true. So like how do you let go as a creator for you need to control everything?
yeah. It's a thin line. You're totally right. I mean, I'm over it with 360 videos. I'm always like, they always have a different perspective. Like, the mix will always sound a little bit different, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with that because you're not losing sound. Just like with visuals, you're literally losing visuals. They could oversee something, but the sound will always be the same. Basically, just the direction will be a little bit different. But in terms of how people are even listening to sound, you never have control of that. As we just discussed, people are not even using headphones. So let's just give them the possibility to tweak the sound as good as much as they want to. And again, who are we to judge, to tell them how they should listen to sound? If they like something else better, we could nudge them into a direction, say, hey, this would be my recommendation. But still, if you want to have something else, go with it. I think that could be the ideal case, that we do, that we give, that we curate the content or something. But if people want to tweak it, you can do it in every video game, that you do to remove the music or do the sound effects louder or something. It's already happening. So
I think it's a
Stay strong as a
philosophical
content creator.
discussion of It's a philosophical discussion of how much does a creator needs to control his own art in order to give an experience to people. Because like
Yeah.
I can also tell you a story and then just ask you, "Oh, do you want the princess to be saved?" I don't know, whatever you want, I'll do that. And like sometimes people don't know what the right experience is. So like you give them full control over the mix and you're like, "Okay, but that's not the story that I wanted to tell you." Um so I think that there's a
Yeah.
balance there.
Also, sorry to add like this AI discussion now, but
Go
honestly,
for it.
this is the future of how I think content could be like. Imagine you watch your favorite, I don't know, Netflix show, but
Yeah.
you become the star of it. Like you, it creates your own version. It plays in the universe just like Star Wars, but you add a prompt and say, now make me the hero of, I don't know, planet Tatooine. Sounds like a very far future, but I don't think so. It's happening so fast. It's insane. And then you have your personalized content. It could still be the same episode. I mean, maybe everybody's seeing the same episode, but I don't know, just the head is replaced or the voice is replaced or it plays with your friends or something like that. And I feel like this could be a thing in the far future.
Reminds me of a part from Ready Player One. I don't know if you read the book, but I think in the second book they have an experience where they have to go, like they go into a film and they have to act everything that is in the film. Like they have to remember every line, but then if you choose like a side character that is not all the time on screen, then you get to just continue with them in their story and they have their own like little lives that are happening. So you get your favorite film, but from a different perspective.
Oh, there's apparently already a Black Mirror episode. Somebody's saying in the chat. Thanks, Seb.
Yeah.
That this is some
Black Mirror
this
episode where people can blur or edit out stuff out of reality. This is actually, yeah.
maybe this is
Okay,
where I
good
got my
to know.
inspiration from. I don't know.
I don't know. It's so hard for me as a creator to think that like I need to give so much control to other people over how my art is, but I guess that like this is just what's coming and like people want their personalized experience. Like everything is becoming more interactive and we give way more control to the user than to the storyteller or the creator.
Yeah. I still feel like it's good that I mean, I'm hating on Dolby all the time, but it's good what they're doing. They try to make it as good as possible, giving the people the best experience that they could have. But as I just mentioned, in the end, you still don't have the control about how people are perceiving the music. Are they just cooking in the meantime? Like, are they listening
Right.
in the car on what speakers? You have no idea. And for us as content creators and as audio engineers, we can still make sure that we don't lose as much percentage while creating all this thing, but in the end, it would just still go down. Like this is just the reality, and it always has been, even with stereo.
Martin, we're getting to the end of the talk. If there are any questions, this would be a good time to write them on the chat before Martin has to go. Any last advice, like something for beginners, how to approach this entire field of spatial audio, where to even begin, how to listen better, any advice that you have to give us?
Yeah. Um, Try to get to get a good overview about spatial audio. Don't be nudged into, oh, spatial audio equals Dolby Atmos or something like that. Try to see the bigger picture and see what resonates most with you. Don't try to hop onto this hype train that's currently not even running, I suppose. That's basically a bubble, I would say. But try to find a use case that you think could be interesting and then just do it. It sounds so stupid, but just start with it and see what happens. And even if it doesn't work at the first time, try to do it again. I feel like people give up too quickly and say, oh, this didn't make sense. And then I just didn't do it again. But then maybe try to find something new. Maybe try to get feedback from somebody else. And ideally, with spatial audio, find a use case. And this is my approach I'm doing that wouldn't have worked in stereo. I guess this is where it gets interesting because most of the time you would have to argue, couldn't I just use stereo, which is much more cheaper? It's much quicker to produce, and maybe try to find something, yeah, that argues well, that adds this value to whatever experience you're doing.
That's a great advice, to be honest. And I'm fully with you. I feel like spatial audio, it's not a technology, it's a means to an end. It's a way to tell your story. And if you're a good creator, you just use it as one of your tools that you have. But don't look at it as, I created it because I want to add spatial audio to my app,
Because
which
I
I'm seeing.
can, like.
As I can. It's the same thing that I'm seeing with visuals all the time, that people would just take traditional 2D app and then just put it in VR, like just the same app, and you have this like floating tablet in front of you. And I'm like, what did we do there? Like, how did we add any value by just putting 2D screen in your VR experience? So I would say, yeah, like think about a new approach and use it as a tool in your toolbox. We do have a question on the chat. It's, how do you see spatial audio advancing with all of these crazy immersive experiences?
So hard to tell, to be honest. I think that now the focus should not be music or films like this mass mediums, which already work great in stereo. I feel like we find more and more smaller use cases that work very good with spatial audio. And it doesn't have to be entertainment. It can be communication. Imagine, I don't know, a Zoom call with spatial audio. It is proven scientifically that it lowers the cognitive load. You can do the calls longer. You're more concentrated because not the people are not sitting in front of you all the time in mono or like in your head. People are, yeah, sitting in front of you just like in real life. And this is just easier for our brain. And Teams now implemented it, FaceTime implemented it, and
My dream is
Clubhouse.
podcasts in like spatial audio. I don't understand why no podcast is using spatial audio to just put people in a room. I mean, I
Yeah.
found one. There was one, like I think immersive audio is doing this once in a while, but that's basically it.
I, I see a lot of potential there, but also I would argue some podcasts are totally fine in mono when you just use this typical podcast microphone inside a studio. Like, what's the point of giving people the studio experience at home? Like, why would you have left, center, right, like three speakers around you? But on the other hand, imagine a podcast on traveling. How great would it be to have it with spatial audio? And what we have there is you tell a space. And I guess this is where we find the sweet spot.
That is true. It's all about the context and how you use it well. Martin, thank you so, so much for joining us. You're going to stay on the Sonic Sphere just to answer if anyone have a question after the talk.
Mhm.
So this is coming up in the next few days, and thank you so much for everyone who joined. Thank you, Martin. We'll see you soon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Cheers from Germany. Bye bye.